I used to think shadows were harmless. Just simple science, right? An absence of light. But that was before one of them started following me. Before it learned to move, even when I was standing perfectly still. It all started last winter, during the worst blackout our town had ever seen. For 3 solid nights, everything was swallowed by a thick, suffocating darkness. No streetlights, no moon, not even a single star in the sky. It was like the world had just ended. On that first night, I saw it. At the edge of my driveway, there was a tall, thin shadow. I figured it was just a tree, but there was no wind and the branches were motionless. Yet, the shadow wasn't. When I blinked, it moved closer, just an inch. So small you'd second-guess yourself, but I knew what I saw. It moved. I quickly shut the curtains, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me in the dark. That was my first mistake. The second night was worse. I heard something outside my bedroom window. Footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging footsteps. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to peek through the blinds, and there it was again, closer now. So tall its head almost reached the top of the window frame. But the most terrifying part? The sound of the footsteps stopped a few seconds before the shadow did. It was as if the sound was just a performance, a mimicry to fool me into thinking it was something human. I didn't sleep a wink that night. On the third night, I was desperate. I turned on every single light in the house, creating a fortress of brightness against the oppressive dark outside. But my relief was short-lived. A low hum, then a flicker, and the power cut out again. The entire house plunged back into that same suffocating blackness. And that's when I saw it. Not outside, inside, standing at the end of my hallway. A pitch-black silhouette, so dark it felt like a hole in reality. Its fingers were impossibly long, dripping down towards the floor like trails of ink. I stood frozen, watching it. And then, I blinked. In that split second, it moved. It was closer. Just a foot away from me now, my eyes started to burn. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. I knew what would happen if I blinked again, so I fought it. I forced my eyelids open, staring at the thing in my hall, my body trembling. But you can only fight a reflex for so long. Eventually, my eyes betrayed me. I had to blink. That one single blink changed everything. When my eyes opened, the shadow was right there, inches from my face. I couldn't breathe. A wave of bone-chilling cold pressed against my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. And then, it whispered. Not with a voice, but with a feeling. A cold, deep thought that slithered directly into my mind. Now I know your shape. The next morning, the power was back on. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The house looked completely normal, as if nothing had happened. But something was wrong. My own shadow. It wasn't right. I'd lift my arm and it would stay still. I'd take a step, and it would lag behind, moving a second too late. Sometimes I'd catch it stretching on its own, its limbs bending at angles that were entirely inhuman. I couldn't stay there. I packed a bag, left everything behind, and moved across the state. I tried to start over to forget what I saw. But you can't run from your own shadow. Every night, no matter where I am, I notice it. It's a little farther from my feet than it should be. A little taller, a little darker. It feels like it's growing, becoming something separate from me. And sometimes I wake up in the dead of night and I swear I can see it. A second shadow standing beside my bed. Perfectly still. Just watching me, waiting for my next blink. Story 2. In the remote farmlands of southern Oregon lies a place called Willow Creek Farm. It's an old family estate, abandoned for decades, where the fields have long since turned to wild grasses and the barns sag under years of neglect. They say the last family to live there left after one horrifying night. But what they left behind still lingers. It was a quiet autumn evening when the new caretaker arrived, a man named Henry. He'd heard the stories from the locals, strange lights seen in the old barn after midnight, the laughter of children echoing in the fields even when none lived for miles, and shadows moving on nights when the moon wasn't full. Henry just dismissed it all as folklore. He locked the farmhouse door, set his lantern on the wooden table, and tried to ignore the sound of the creek that ran behind the property. Willow Creek. It sang softly, a gentle burble, but sometimes, just under the surface of the sound, you could swear you heard voices. On his very first night, Henry woke with a jolt. The clock read 3:14 a.m. The lantern's flame, which he'd left burning low, flickered wildly. He heard footsteps. Not in the house, but outside, in the barn. He grabbed his heavy flashlight and stepped out into the cold night air. The massive barn door, which he was sure he had latched, creaked open by itself. He stepped inside, his light cutting through the thick darkness. He saw rows of old dusty stalls. In one of them sat a broken rocking horse, moving slowly back and forth, back and forth. On the ground beside it, almost hidden in the straw, was a single, small red shoe. No child lived here. He froze, his blood running cold. Then he heard it. Faint giggling, like children playing a game of hide-and-seek in the dark. He swung the flashlight beam around wildly nothing. Then, a new sound. A growl. Low, deep, and coming from the hayloft directly above him. With his heart pounding in his ears, Henry climbed the rickety wooden ladder. At the top, there was nothing but a searing, unnatural cold and a scrap of white cloth, like from a child's dress, fluttering down through the floorboards below. The next day, as the sun tried weakly to burn off the morning mist, Henry discovered something else. Footprints in the muddy field, tiny, bare footprints, leading from the farmhouse straight toward the creek. He followed them. On the other side of the water, half buried in the damp earth, he found a small collection of old photographs. They were sepia-toned pictures of children, friends of the previous owners, he guessed, all smiling for the camera. But someone or something had scratched out their eyes. There were no names, no dates, just jagged tears in the paper where their eyes should have been, and one message scrawled in faded ink on the back of a photo. "We play by the water now." That night, the tapping started, soft at first, then insistent. On the windows, Henry counted them. 37 distinct knocks coming from every window of the house at once. He peered out into the darkness, but the moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. He saw nothing. Then a whisper, so close it felt like it was right beside his ear. "Play with us." Pure terror seized him. He bolted for his car, fumbling for the keys, but the engine wouldn't start. He tried again and again. Nothing. He looked at the keys in his hand and watched as they seemed to dissolve into mist, vanishing completely. The car radio crackled to life on its own, a storm of static and voices distant, overlapping, crying for help. He locked himself in the car, hands shaking, and waited for the sun to rise. At dawn, he looked out. The field was empty. The mud was smooth. There were no tracks, no footprints. On what would be his final day, Henry found the barn door wide open again. Inside, the sound of children's laughter echoed off the high rafters, louder this time, more confident. He had to know. He ran up the ladder to the loft. On the floor, arranged in a perfect row, were several small rocking chairs. All of them were moving, slowly, rhythmically, in unison. He pointed his flashlight at them, and one by one they stopped. All but one. On the seat of the last moving chair sat a tiny figure. It was pale, its head tilted at an impossible angle, and where its eyes should have been were two black, empty pits. The figure stood up and began to walk toward him. Henry opened his mouth and screamed, a sound that was swallowed by the immense, silent darkness of the farm before he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he was lying on the cold ground outside. The farmhouse was empty, his bags were gone. The front door was unlocked, the key he'd used broken off in the lock. He stumbled to his car, which started on the first try, and drove away without looking back. He never returned. Locals now say that if you drive past Willow Creek Farm after midnight, you might see a single, white rocking horse sitting on the porch steps, rocking gently in the darkness. And if you're foolish enough to stop the car, you might hear the sweet voices of children calling from the creek. Come play with us. They say if you join them, you will never leave. The fields still whisper, the creek still laughs, and Willow Creek Farm waits for its next visitor. Never go where the children's laughter in the dark is real. Thank you for watching. If this story chilled you to the bone, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next animated horror story. Story 3. People always whispered that something was wrong with Blackwood. They talked about strange disappearances, sudden deaths, shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't, but nobody believed the truth until it was too late. Nobody believed a shadow could stalk you, could follow you, could kill you. Not until I saw it happen with my own eyes. The first death that made no sense was Ian Cole's. His body was found in the woods, sitting upright against a tree, eyes stretched open in a terror so deep that even the coroner said he had never seen anything like it. There were no wounds, no poison, no signs of struggle. It looked like Ian simply died from fear. But the terrifying part wasn't his face. It was his phone. His last recorded video was nearly corrupted, but one frame survived, a tall, twisted shadow standing behind him. A shadow that didn't match Ian, a shadow that didn't belong to anything human. Blackwood had something locals called the silent hours, a strange window every night between 2:47 a.m. and 3:12 a.m. Dogs barked at empty corners. Lights flickered for no reason. Temperatures dropped suddenly as if winter itself passed through the room. People claimed they saw silhouettes standing in doorways, behind trees, in the corners of their bedrooms. Most ignored it, others moved away. But after Anna disappeared, no one ignored it anymore. Anna's final recording was never shown publicly, but I managed to get a copy. The video starts with her laughing on the phone in her backyard, but suddenly she stops and looks to her left. Her breathing changes slow, fearful. She whispers, "Who's there?" She takes a few steps toward the hedge and something moves inside it, not by the wind, but as if something large shifted beneath the branches. Then a figure rises from the darkness. A tall shadow with no face, no eyes, no feet, its lower half fading into the ground. Anna drops the phone and screams. The audio captures a horrible sound like bones stretching, not breaking, unfolding. When police arrived, Anna was simply gone. No signs of running, no footprints. Just a patch of frozen soil. After that, more people vanished. A jogger was found dead on a trail bench, frozen in place, staring at a street lamp. A school janitor disappeared in the middle of his shift, but his shadow stayed on the wall for 3 hours after he was gone, flickering even when the light wasn't shining. A truck driver, as his CCTV footage showed his shadow stepping out of the vehicle before the camera cut off, even though his body remained in the driver's seat. Police imposed a nighttime lockdown. It didn't help. My neighbor, Mr. Dorian, was the first to tell me he had seen something inside his home. He said the shadow stayed in the corner near his dresser and got closer every night. I didn't believe him until the night he died. He came to my door trembling, drenched in sweat, whispering it said my name. I followed him home. In his dark bedroom, I saw it. A shadow darker than the darkness around it, tall and crooked, swaying as if breathing. When I blinked, it moved closer. And then it leaned over him. His chest collapsed inward, his breath stopped instantly, and he fell onto the floor. The shadow folded in on itself and dissolved into the corner. The imprint of his shadow burned itself into the wooden boards. I started digging through old records. It turns out Blackwood was once a mining town. A century ago, miners complained about a moving darkness in the tunnels. Something that followed them when their lanterns burned low. After a cave-in trapped 17 miners in total darkness, their bodies were recovered with shadows that didn't match their form, some stretched, some twisted, some twitching on their own. A page from an old mining log read, "The shadow is not a ghost. It's a shape without a body, and it needs one. 3 nights ago, I saw it again, in my living room. Standing perfectly still, but its form flickered like smoke underwater. Its head nearly touched the ceiling, its arms long and trembling. It leaned forward and, in a voice that wasn't a voice, more like a vibration shaking my skull, it whispered, 'I've chosen you.' I ran out of the house, but now, no matter where I go, something is different. My shadow is wrong, it lags slightly behind me. It stretches too far. Sometimes it twitches when I don't move. And at night, I hear breathing behind my dresser. A slow, deep inhale that feels like cold air pulling at my spine. Tonight, I finally decided to record it. I pointed my phone under the dresser and pressed record. When I played the video back, my shadow wasn't alone. Another shadow stood beside it, tall, stretched, bending over me while I slept. And as my sleeping body shifted, the second shadow moved. It slid across the wall and touched mine. And then my shadow smiled.